Thank you for tuning in to All Allow It Nevada, your trusted podcast for quick insights into Nevada's judicial education. I'm your host, Anne Marie Mayu, and co-hosting today is Seth Easley. We represent the Supreme Court of Nevada Administrative Office of the Court's Judicial Branch Training Unit. In this episode, we explore the topic of Interstate Compact, and we're pleased to welcome our guest, the Interstate Commission for Adult Offender Supervision, Executive Director, Ashley Lippert. It's a delight to have you here, Ashley.
Thank you for having me, Anne Marie. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. So let's get right into it. Can you provide a brief overview of what Interstate Compact is and its purpose?
Certainly. So the compact was established in 1937, actually. It was designed to regulate the movement of probationers and parolees who needed to move across state lines. Effectively, it transfers and tracks individuals who need to transfer their supervision, and it ensures that they maintain continuity when they relocate to another state. The commission is the compact's governing body, and it establishes and enforces the compact's rules and regulations, as well as providing training. We collect and share data with states and other criminal justice agencies, and we also offer opportunities for victims to be heard and receive notice on rule changes, as well as when individuals move through the compact.
Okay. So Rule 5108 has undergone some changes this year, approved by the commissioner. And could you briefly describe what those changes entail?
Sure. So we had just a very simple change to that rule. 5108 governs the process for determining probable cause in a retaking situation. So that means when an individual is going to be taken from the receiving state and sent back to the originating state. And there were provisions in that rule that required the receiving state to hold the individual once that probable cause was found. We changed that shall hold to a may hold because there were challenges within the receiving states as far as holding those individuals, as well as we wanted to make sure we were in compliance with the Gagnon versus Scarpelli court cases that govern probable cause for states. And that shall hold was not a requirement in those original court cases. So we changed that this past year to a may hold within our probable cause rule.
Oh,
seems like a simple change, but I think it has a big impact.
Sure. I can see why. I can see why it would have a big impact. So can you kind of tell us what the process for a judge would be when they're dealing with a case involving an offender who is subject to Interstate Compact?
That's a great question. The decision to grant a transfer is solely at the discretion of the sending or the sentencing state. There is no right of a convicted person to travel across state lines or to serve their sentence in another state. Supervised individuals, they are able to work with their supervising officer or release agent to initiate an interstate transfer. Eligible individuals, they must request a transfer through the compact in order to reside in another state. And once that is requested, the receiving state has 45 days to investigate that supervision plan. During that 45 calendar days, no travel to the receiving state is allowed. However, we do have some exceptions within our rules that allows individuals to be in the other state during the investigation. We allow that if they are a resident of the receiving state or if there are circumstances that require an expedited transfer or an expedited reason for them to be in the receiving state during the investigation.
So what are some of the offenses that you have seen, or the most common offenses that you have seen where a request to transfer comes up?
I'd say a large majority of the crime of convictions that we see in the compact, a large majority of those are drug offenses. I would venture to guess that I'd say about 60% are all drug-related offenses. The offenses that would require an individual to move through the compact, those are all felony offenses. And when we have a few qualifying misdemeanor offenses, we don't supervise all misdemeanor offenses, But there are a few that do qualify under the compact. That includes an offense where there was direct or threatened physical or psychological harm, an offense that involved the use or possession of a firearm, any second or subsequent misdemeanor conviction of DUI, driving while impaired under drugs or alcohol, and then also any sexual offense that requires the individual to register as a sex offender in the sending state.
Okay. What criteria must be met for a transfer under the compact?
So that criteria would include if they want to remain in the other state for more than 45 days, and if they are convicted of one of those qualifying offenses that I just mentioned. And then it's also mandated in the rules that the individual be in substantial compliance with the terms of their supervision. They must have a valid plan of supervision in the receiving state, and they must have 90 days or more of supervision remaining in order to be eligible and qualify for the compact.
Okay. So this is what I'm envisioning. And this is just someone, maybe just a regular person, maybe, but I'm envisioning like someone on vacation in another state. Do you get any of that where they commit a crime and then they want to go home?
This just as an aside, a funny story we say a lot in the compact is in Florida, you come on vacation, you leave on probation. That's a funny thing. And it does happen. And that happens more often than you might think. And I don't think individuals are always aware. Certainly, if you're not aware of the compact, you wouldn't be aware of the fact that, if you are in another state on vacation and you commit a crime that puts you on supervision, it's not an automatic that you get to go home. You have to stay in that state to settle your case and ensure that all that transfer information gets shared between the two states before you can return to your home. That's why we do have some exclusions in our criteria that allow for, if you're a resident of the receiving state or if there's expedited reasons for that transfer, that we allow that, because some individuals could be stuck in a sentencing state and not be able to return home.
Right. And usually when you're on vacation, you let your guard down anyway, right? Like you're on vacation. But you still have to obey the rules and the laws. So what misconceptions or misunderstandings do you feel that you've seen that judges might have about Interstate Compact?
Well, I think it's a little bit like we talked about. I think the individuals themselves sometimes are not aware that they cannot relocate to another state without adhering to the terms of the compact. And also we have seen that there are some courts that, while they may occasionally grant permission for an individual to move or to travel, it's important for judges to understand that their approval alone doesn't suffice for relocation. So in addition to judicial consent, individuals must also initiate the transfer by applying through their state's compact office. And this ensures that proper procedures are followed and that all necessary notifications and approvals are obtained before the transfer can take place. The compact is a judge's best tool for ensuring that proper supervision, monitoring, and reporting about the success of that individual takes place.
So whose responsibility is it to, because it sounds like you need to educate the offender, right, to this possibility if you have someone who is from out of state, whose responsibility is it to educate the offender that they have this option?
Well, that's a great question. It's important for courts to educate that individual. It's important for their supervising officer to educate that individual that they cannot just leave the state until they get an approved transfer. We largely focus on training field officers, field staff, working with states to make sure that there's a good understanding of the compact and its procedures so that individuals don't just go without getting an approved transfer reporting instructions to be able to be in that other state. It happens, though. It does happen where individuals either aren't aware of the compact or they move before they get that approval to to be in the other state. And then we have to do a lot of work with this. The states have to do a lot of work with each other and communicating about getting the proper documentation and information on that individual so that their supervision stays intact.
Right. So I would imagine that when an offender appears in court, the idea of transferring has already been presented to them. So the judge would be aware of that?
Maybe not in all cases.
Okay.
Sometimes I think that happens when during the court proceedings, and it is brought up during the court proceedings, or it could be a matter of that they have already settled their court proceedings and they are on supervision, but they realize that I need to move to this other state because of a job, or my family is moving, or there are some treatment options in another state that would allow that individual to be more successful. There's any number of reasons why that would happen, on the front end when they are during the court proceedings, or it could occur later once they have already been established on supervision.
And then that's when they would put in the request.
That's right. They would do that through their supervising officer.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. What are some of the common challenges that you see in your position as the director?
With judges and courts, the two biggest challenges that I see are, sometimes there's cases where a judge may not have much exposure to the compact. They might have one or two cases a year, if that, perhaps, where they might have to deal with an individual who wishes to move through the Interstate Compact. So their knowledge might be limited on what our rules and regulations are around a transfer. So that's the first, probably one of the bigger ones, is just lack of exposure, lack of awareness. And then, another issue that we sometimes see is clarity of procedures. Especially if they don't have much exposure to the compact, they may not be aware of what's the proper procedures. You can't just say, go and send no more and do that in another state. They've got to have some understanding of it, that to educate that individual that they have to wait until a transfer is approved and what those procedures are, recognizing the authority of the compact. Each state has a compact office that can help provide some judicial education to ensure a more smooth application and transfer process. And I think sometimes the courts or judges aren't aware that there is a resource within their own state that they can work with and get that information and understanding of what are the steps, what are the proper steps that need to take place in order for that individual's supervision to remain intact during that process.
So once the offender puts that request in and it comes across the judge's desk, would you suggest that they contact their Interstate Compact office directly, just to kind of, if they're unsure about the process? Would that be the first best practice?
That would certainly be a good first best practice, because that individual, the compact office within your state, is going to be the subject matter expert on Interstate Compact and certainly be able to provide them assistance. We also have a large number of resources and information that are available to the courts that are on our website that are designed specifically for judges and court officers. We have a quick reference guide available. We have some small short vignette training videos that are available to judges in the courts. And then we also, if they like a little light reading, we have a very large bench book reference that goes into great detail on all of our legal requirements. But and then certainly you can always contact the national office. We're here also as a resource to help guide and educate the courts and judges on the compact and any questions or issues that they may have in, being able to approve a transfer for an individual.
I mean, that's great. The first contact you and I had, you did send out a lot of really great resources, and I did peruse those very quickly. But we will make sure that those resources are available to those who listen to this episode so that they can have them easily at their fingertips.
While we pause for a brief commercial break, I'd like to make a request to our audience. I'll Allow It Nevada isn't exclusively a certified legal education podcast. It's designed to be inclusive for everyone. Our aim is to connect with communities and provide insightful perspectives on the Nevada judiciary. If you find these episodes enjoyable, kindly share the experience with your friends and family. Your support is greatly appreciated.
So what are some reasons that a transfer would be denied?
So that's also a great question. And I think that comes up a lot because there is some confusion around that. Our eligibility requirements require that an individual have a valid plan of supervision in the receiving state. And there can be any number of reasons why a receiving state might find that the plan of supervision provided to them isn't going to work for that individual. It could be where they plan to live. It could be that when they went to verify the information provided to them, that their support network, who they planned to live with, or their means of support is no longer there or available to them. It could mean that the treatment option or whatever reason that individual was going to the other state, whether that was for treatment or school or some other support system, that those support systems are no longer in place once the investigation occurs. And that happens a lot more often than you might think. The sending state provides all this information to the receiving state. When they go to verify it, they may find that information is either not accurate or it's no longer relevant, and they no longer see that they have a good plan of supervision where they could be successful in the receiving state. And sometimes those plans just fall through. But I think it's important. And one thing we try to do when we work with states, and many states are very good and successful at doing this, is that communication between states. A lot of times it's not a flat denial, but states will work together to find an alternative plan so that individual can still come to the receiving state. And that's the relationships that are built among the compact offices and among the individuals that work in compact. They do a good job of trying to work through some of those issues when they occur, because we know that if someone is a resident of the receiving state, that their home and their family is in that other state. So trying to work together to find a solution that allows that individual to still come and be supervised in the receiving state is the best option for rehabilitation and reentry.
And that communication between the states that you mentioned is probably one of the most important pieces of this whole process.
Most definitely. It's something we talk about constantly among commission members when we conduct trainings and when we talk about, how we resolve various issues as they come up. When states work together and they communicate effectively, that facilitates a much smoother transfer process. It allows the states to verify eligibility requirements, but it also confirms, compliance with requirements. They're able to share information that assesses that individual's risk level to determine, what that supervision needs to look like once they're in the receiving state. And again, the more information that is shared, the more documentation that is provided to the other state, the better set up the receiving state is to provide that supervision.
And again, like you had mentioned, the resources that you have, I noticed that there was a bench book. And I believe you mentioned it earlier on your website. So that would be probably the best resource for our judges.
Most definitely. The bench book is a comprehensive guide that it doesn't just cover, our rules, but it covers a lot of the procedural elements of the compact as well. So that's probably our most comprehensive guide that we have that is available to judges. But we also have some smaller, shorter resources that are designed for just specific pieces of the compact. So if you don't want to read the whole bench book, you have some small, quick reference guides that are available that cover, various elements of the compact process, so they can catch, quick information if they don't have time to read the entire bench book.
Right. So once the offender is transferred under the Interstate Compact, can you explain how compliance with the terms of supervision are monitored?
Certainly. And I'm sure that's very important for your judges to understand, especially if they have an individual that wishes to go to another state and they want to be sure that there is compliance with the conditions of their supervision. And once that individual is in the receiving state, they are supervised as the receiving state would supervise a similarly convicted individual within their state. So that supervision is maintained throughout the course of the time that individual is in the receiving state. We also have requirements within our rules that require receiving states to provide progress reports and updates to the sending state. And if there are any issues during supervision that may arise, whether that is with the individual who transferred, whether they have violated any conditions of their supervision or if they have any new charges, all of that gets reported through our national data system, which is real-time information that goes directly to the sending state so that they can make determinations on what next steps need to occur with regard to that individual's supervision.
Well, that's great. I mean, it sounds like you guys have everything kind of put in place. So if a judge suspects that the offender is violating the terms of their supervision under the compact, what steps can they take?
That's a great question also. The sentencing authority, they may wish to initiate a return or a retaking, and they are able to do that at any time during supervision to modify the sentence terms, to address those violations or non-compliant behavior. And as long as there aren't any active investigations or new or pending charges in the supervising state, then they have that ability to initiate that retaking or return process. As well, and depending on the level of any infraction or noncompliance, the receiving state can also request a retaking based on behavior that warrants likely revocation of supervision. And in that instance, the supervising state or the receiving state will provide documentation of those issues up to and including a probable cause hearing. And that may provide essential documentations so that the sending state can make a determination on what next steps they need to take in managing that individual's return.
So there are ways to take that back if it's just not working for them.
There are, yes.
That's good.
And that's at the discretion of both states. So there isn't just one state that makes that determination. And again, that's where that communication and collaboration is so important.
That is, I'm sure. I mean, the communication would be key to making sure that it's successful for everyone. So the key benefits of this Interstate Compact for judges as well as the offender, in your position, can you share any examples of like a really great, obviously no names, but a really great story that you were able to be a part of that we can kind of show our audience the benefit of this program?
I do, and I am so excited to share with you. A couple of years ago, in a joint initiative with the National Institute of Corrections, we produced a documentary film to shed light on the Interstate Compact from the perspective of the individuals themselves who are moving through the compact. And the documentary gives viewers a behind-the-scenes look into the lives of about 5 different individuals, but it highlights 3 very specifically as they have navigated through the compact, giving a really sharp glimpse into what their struggles were, what their triumphs were, and the challenges they faced, not only in moving through the Interstate Compact, but their lives that led to them being on supervision in the first place. So it highlighted their individual stories. It provides a look at the compact and how the compact can facilitate not only the interstate supervision, but promoting public safety and how it directly impacted those individuals' lives. There's a real human aspect behind the bureaucratic framework of the compact, and it really emphasizes the reason why individuals need to seek a transfer and the benefits it can afford them. You can view the documentary. There's a link through our website. The National Institute of Corrections also has it on their website. And it's a really interesting film that looks at Interstate Compact in these individuals. It's about just under an hour long. And I hope that if there's anyone listening that is interested to see a more in-depth look at how it impacts individuals, that they take an opportunity to view it.
Well, I think that's great. When we're talking about Interstate Compact, the name sounds very official, right?
Right.
But when you really break it down like that, it definitely is. There's a human touch to the consideration of being able to move to a different state where that offender is going to get more support and be more successful, maybe in, however they need to readjust their lives so that, we can just do better. That's the goal, right? So I definitely see the human value, that human touch in agreeing to let someone move to a different state. And if that's going to promote their success for not experiencing recidivism, that's for sure. So how do you see the role of the compact evolving in the future?
Well, I expect that the compact will continue to evolve in response to changes in the criminal justice landscape. We continue to emphasize the importance of enhancing efficiency, our own effectiveness, and fairness in interstate compact transfers. But we've also continually had to, over time, adapt to different emerging trends and challenges in the criminal justice system, certainly through all the changes that we saw during COVID. But there's always been changes in, different sentencing laws, the impact on technology and supervision practices. And honestly, I really think it's the great work of our member states and territories and how they collaborate and the work that they do to continue to rise to those challenges, responding to those evolving needs, that helps to uphold the principles and mission of the compact.
Well, I agree. I think it certainly takes a team, it sounds like, to get something like this done and have it be successful for our offender. Do you have any final advice or insights or anything else that you want to share before we close out this podcast, Ashley?
I want to be sure that judges understand we have technical and training assistance available to them. There's lots of opportunities for them to get training and information. And I would highly encourage that if there are questions about the compact or anything they are uncertain of, that they would either reach out to their state compact offices or contact us at the national office. And there's also opportunities. Every state also has what's called a state council. This is a support network of in-state stakeholders that help support interstate compact within the state. All state councils require a judicial representative, and strongly encourage, if there's judges in Nevada that are interested in working with the compact office or on a state council, that those opportunities exist. And we certainly encourage you to view the documentary and become more familiar with our rules and processes. And if we can help you in that endeavor, we'd be happy to. And
if our judges have specific questions, who can they reach out to you? Do they just call the main office?
Absolutely. They can call the main office and they will be routed directly to me.
Okay. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for being here. This is really a part of the judiciary and our laws that people don't usually think about unless they've been exposed to. And I think it's really great to kind of get the information out there and let everyone know that the resources and support is out there for this specific request.
Well, I want to just say thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you wanting to highlight the Interstate Compact through your podcast and giving me an opportunity to share a little bit with you and your listeners. Thank you for that.
Well, again, I just want to reiterate, thank you so much for being willing to speak with us. You've shared a lot of really valuable information. It's great information for all our listeners, be it the public and as well as the Nevada judiciary as a whole.
Thank you.
A heartfelt appreciation to our guests and as well as to everyone who has tuned into this podcast. Before we wrap up, here are a couple of important reminders. For continuing legal education credit, be sure to complete a certificate of attendance and email it to jepodcasts@nvcourts.nv.gov. If you have any questions, topic suggestions, or comments, we welcome and value your feedback. Please email them to jepodcasts@nvcourts.nv.gov. We look forward to hearing from our listeners. Stay tuned for more episodes of I'll Allow It Nevada, released every first and third Friday of the month. This is Seth Easley signing off. Take care, Nevada.